You heard it from him. I didn't say that. You go after this guy. I didn't say any of that.
Except
Okay.
in the last video.
That's just a suggestion.
Just pass along the bread and cup, the open brethren all.
So the young people are leaving the Brethren Assembly en masse, as I talked about in my last video. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. So who are these young people, you're asking? Well, you're looking at one of them. Here's me right here, Danny from Conversations for Christ. And today I'd like to welcome my good friend Sean Stewart, who has been going to church with me for the better part of 11 years, okay? And today we're going to probe his brain about what he thinks about the subject. But first, let me just get this out of the way. Tell me a little bit about who you are and why are you credible enough to talk about this subject?
Thanks, Danny. Well, yeah, as you were saying, I've been going to the church for like 11 years, something like that. I started going, I must have been like 11 or 12 years old, something like that. And that, for all intents and purposes, is the church I grew up in, church I grew up going to, and is sort of where I gained my understanding of church, my understanding of God and how to read the Bible and how to pursue Him, where I got most of my role models for Christian living. Basically everything that I knew until recently, I got from that church. And I feel like I have a lot to say and a lot of thoughts based on that. I'm very thankful for the Brethren Church. I feel like it's given me a lot of wisdom and perspective in a lot of really positive ways. But obviously I'm not going there right now, so I'm excited to talk about it all.
Okay, yeah, so for a little bit of context, we have been going to the same church I've been going since I was 11 years old, and it is a open brethren assembly. Now, I know the term brethren isn't actually very liked within the assemblies, but for all intents purposes, we're just going to be using that term. If you're offended, sorry.
Bummer.
What?
Bummer.
Wah, wah.
Womp womp.
I am cutting that part out.
No.
Okay.
Coward.
So you said that you have been there for, what did you say, 11?
Yeah, 11 years. I don't know. I'd have to actually count, but it's over a decade.
Okay, over a decade. And you have been tremendously thankful for some of the aspects of it and some of the values instilled for you. Okay. Can you tell me what some of those values are?
For sure. So one of the most important things that I took away from being in the Brethren Church is just living all out for Jesus, living all out for Christ. I think that's something that is very hard to find today, a sort of just all out attitude where you just orient your entire life around living for Him. And where do you find out about all that and how to live your life? The Bible. And really finding that as your source for how you ought to live your life, and just studying and pursuing that and pursuing a life of holiness and forsaking self and all these things. It's sort of got a radical quality to it that is hard to find. And I really am appreciative of how I've taken that away from the Brethren Assembly, just that respect for the Bible, what it can say, and the devotion that Jesus really asks from us, that I think can be overlooked, but not in the Brethren Assembly.
Yeah, that's good. What you described is actually some of the founding principles for when the Brethren first started. And I would agree with you that I really took all of that away. If I hadn't grown up in my church, had it been anywhere else, I don't think I would have been where I am today with the Lord. So yeah, I'm very thankful as well. So the elephant in the room would be, if this church is so great, has so many wonderful qualities, why are you not there anymore? And why are we talking about some of maybe the problems that we're finding with the assemblies and other young people are finding, and thus they're leaving at a really rapid rate? So tell me from beginning to end, your journey of why now you can't stay there anymore and you have to find somewhere else.
Okay. Beginning to end. Okay. Well, I guess I'll start by saying that, like, definitely in this hour or whatever, I'm not going to be able to get into like every detail or anything like that.
Right.
So I'll just do a bit of an overview with the common themes. The other thing I want to say is that this is my personal experience, so I can only speak as far as my own personal anecdotal experience. This isn't absolute truth I'm sharing. This isn't representative of every assembly everywhere or every person everywhere. It just isn't. It can't be, right? This is just what I've seen. But growing up in the assembly, there's a lot of goals that were put in front of me. There was just a pursuit, a way that you ought to show up at church, and a way of interpreting the Bible that is very specific. And I found that increasingly hard to maintain, I guess I could say, is one of the ways. Just tons of nuance to all of this. But what it eventually came down to is the fact that I was struggling to be okay just in life generally, and that bled out into the church. And pretty soon I was finding it really hard to sit through the services. I was finding it extremely difficult to talk to anybody there, to engage with some of the ministry or the prayer meeting or the different things that happen there. And this is largely because I just was feeling very not okay. I was feeling very unwell, not in like a physical sense, but in a mental sense. Yeah, feeling super unwell. And I felt like the church was not a place where I could find any help for that whatsoever. Now, the reasons that I was feeling unwell are like, they might be right, they may be wrong, but I don't think it's an uncommon experience for someone to be feeling so bad that they're having a hard time like thinking clearly and making life decisions and all that stuff. And I was very passionate about the Brethren Assembly. I believed it does have tons of good qualities and things like that. And I recognized some of the things that I disagreed with, some of the things that you talked about in your video. But I was fully committed to ironing those out, to working with the leadership and pushing youth ministry and all these things until this sort of season of life and this cloud came over my life. And I found it extremely, extremely difficult to continue going to a church that I struggled to feel at home in and struggled to feel supported in. And it was a very just lonely experience. And I realized that I needed to make changes in life if anything was going to get better. Things just needed to change. And this is probably like about a year ago. This is all kind of coming to a head. And one of the things I decided to change was to stop going to my church, because I recognized that as much as I wanted to pour into the church in this current season of life, in that time right there, I really desperately needed a community around me. I needed support. I needed mentorship, people and men in my life that would, take me out for coffee, and not just do that, but also listen to me and very gently and understanding guide me in the different areas of life. And I recognized that I was not getting any of those things at my church that I was at. And I could just suddenly see the trajectory for my life, that I needed those things very badly. And honestly, a lot of what led me to realizing I needed those things so badly was the fact that I was reading the Bible and seeing that we need to confess our sins to one another, that we need to stir one another up to love and good works, to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And I just recognized that aspect in my life, and specifically through the community of my church, was almost non-existent, or at the very least very superficial, in a saying hi on Sunday kind of way. So that led me to the point where I felt like I can't stay here. At least I can't stay here for right now. I need to change something. I need to go do something. So I started visiting other churches then. I definitely visited other churches before, but I was definitely visiting other churches in the sense of like, I need to find another place to go right now, another place that believes in the Bible, believes in truth, but also believes in community and mentorship and support and just that family fellowship aspect of church. And yeah.
Okay. So maybe to try to summarize your idea a little bit, a very large part of it, number one, is there's a standard of living that's come out of how we interpret the Bible in our church that you find unattainable at that current season of life. And then you're trying to seek support because you're struggling so much, but you're not finding it. None whatsoever. Okay, so I want to dig into that a little bit more. What is it? Describe how it is for you. Like, let's say you just walk into church on a given Sunday morning, and it's a Sunday morning that you're not feeling great,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and or you're having interactions with the people who are regulars at this church.
Mm-hmm.
What is it exactly that you're experiencing, and how are they communicating with you, and what is it that makes you feel uncomfortable to seek help in that situation?
Really good question. So I'm walking into church, I'm not feeling well. Honestly, one of the things that sticks out the most is that I knew that nobody in the church understood what I personally was going through at that moment in time. Not that they couldn't understand, but there was nobody that had personally taken the time to understand where I was at. Like, I don't doubt that there's people that have had similar experiences to me in the church. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that, like, to know me, like, personally, and to know that. So then you don't have an advocate in the church. You don't have a representative. You don't have anybody that's vouching for you. For example, if you come in late, or if you come in and you're kind of a mess, or if you come in and you don't say anything during the breaking of bread or something like that, then there's a sense of like, well, why aren't you able to keep that status quo? Now, a lot of this is probably in my head, to be fair, right? But I think it's an important thing to address, and I think that the church community should be the sort of depressurization of how you feel there. There should be like an outlet there through at least somebody in the church that is allowing you to sort of work through these things and process these things. What was your second question?
Second question is, what is it that makes you uncomfortable to maybe reach out? Because one of the pushback I will get is, so why didn't you say anything? You had needs. Why didn't you express it? Express it to us so that we can understand how to help you better. So what is it that made you uncomfortable to do that?
Great question. And honestly, fair criticism. There's, always more reaching out I could have done. Like, no matter how much I did, there's always something more I could have done. So maybe that would have fixed it. Honestly, I would say that my experience, again, just my experience, was that I didn't trust anybody in the church in that way. There was nobody that I felt like I trusted with the sort of secrets of my life in that way. And many times, either overhearing other interactions or interactions with myself, because I definitely have had one-on-ones with leadership and other people in the church. They, again, this is an anecdotal experience. Maybe I did it wrong or something like that. But I didn't get a sense and an understanding that they were going to be able to like slow down and be patient with me and understand in the way that I really needed them to. Again, this could be personal error, but if it's a common experience across many people, then I think it's important to talk about, because that's what we ought to be as Christians, right? Slow to speak, quick to listen. We ought to be there for each other. We ought to be just full of kindness and understanding for where the person's at, as well as understanding very in a nuanced fashion, like what's sin and what's just the struggle of life, what's not your fault and what is your fault, what do you need to work on, what do you need to change. And I really was not able to put it into words at the time, even remotely, because I was not doing very well. But now I recognize that there was not the help that I really desperately needed. I didn't see any my odds were not very good in all practical sense that I was going to find that help somewhere in the church. And that led me to feeling uncomfortable to reach out to people, because you talked about it in your video, right? It's kind of like a crude way of putting it, but the wisdom shotgun. And I totally get it. I've done it in my life, and I try to avoid it as much as possible now. But it's where you share your burdens, because you're just looking for maybe not answers even, but just somebody to listen and understand, which goes back to that verse, weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice. And instead you kind of, they summarize what you've said, usually after not listening long enough, and then answers are delivered back to you like twice as long, or even if it was one time like equal length, of how to work through these things and to fix these things and find comfort in these things. And just, I appreciate the good intentions, but it would often come down to the fact that this was unhelpful. And I was ready to listen. I did listen. I spent a lot of time listening, spent a lot of time being quiet. I'm not like an aggressive, confrontational, super chatty person at all. And I found it very difficult to find help in these things. And I definitely tried. There was a lot of time where I was like, okay, and I took that advice. I took it very seriously, and I applied it to my life very seriously. Some of the advice, like read your Bible more, pray more, for example, or things like that, which is great advice, but is very, very simplistic. And you should do that, but there's perhaps other additional things you can do. There's things like, well, maybe you should go to bed on time. Or maybe you need to really stop thinking that way about that person. Or you need to stop being so hard on yourself if you can't finish your to-do list for the day, or different things like that, right? There's a nuance to that. Or maybe just not helping at all and just helping through listening and understanding. So long story short, I found it very difficult to find solace and to find real, genuine help in the church. Even though I tried for a long time, I realized that this is not working. And I need to change something. This is not working.
Okay. Coughing break. Thanks for sharing that. Those are very common experience, I'm going to tell you. As a young person who has spoken to other young people in the assemblies, very, very common experience. I think the core issue, just for that, is the word empathy. Empathy is very much lacking. And it's the golden rule. Treat others as you would want to be treated. Now, I think there was a misapplication for many, myself included, is what I would give myself, I give to others. So basically, the advice I give to myself and the practices that work for me, I think it's going to work for everybody else. But I don't think that's what Jesus meant when he says treat others as you yourself would like to be treated. It's the level of respect and care and love that you give to yourself. How much are you willing to sacrifice for yourself? And how much are you willing to do to make sure that you're well taken care of? Again, it's that level. It's not the exact things that you're doing, but it's the, I guess it's the mindset. So there's a big part of failure, unfortunately, I think, of many Christians in that regard, not just in the assemblies, but everywhere. Okay.
Can I butt in?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a very strange experience because you'd expect it with just one person, but it seems to be the common experience among many people in the Brethren Assembly.
Yep.
Which is, I find strange because it seems more indicative that this is a sort of a mindset at large, like in the Brethren Assembly, whatever that may be, that's causing this sort of attitude, that this is sort of the defense we put up and the kind of help we offer, the sort of brand of help that's in the Brethren Assembly. And I find it strange because, it's not limited to one person. It seems to be very prevalent, not to everyone,
no,
but to a lot of people.
Yeah, it seems like a part of the culture, right?
Yeah. That approach.
Very interesting. Okay, so I think that segues a little bit into what is it that, just for you personally, if the assembly that you go to were to change into the way that you want it to be, where you feel like you could be helped, what would that look like? And maybe also talk a little bit about how your new church has been better at that than your old church.
Very interesting. Okay. If I could change one thing magically, I think honestly it would just be the ability to listen and take feedback well and take feedback seriously, as well as just to think through those things carefully and with nuance. Often I find that the logic used in the Brethren Church is very simplistic, and if it leans too far into the new, or too far into the practical, or too far into the interpreting the Bible in a different way than it has been in the Brethren Church. If it leans too far into any one of those categories, it's very quickly dismissed, like super quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even if it's wrong, if somebody brings up a concern that's new or practical or a different way of interpreting the Bible, even if they're very wrong and it's very obviously wrong, I wouldn't want to quickly dismiss that. I would want to understand why they're asking that. I would want to understand what their concerns are, understand where that reasoning is coming from, and why that logic falls apart beyond we shouldn't like go too hard into the planning and practical, and beyond, well, this is the way the Bible is, and beyond that, like, we don't want to do things too new, right? That would be the one thing I would change, because I think many other changes would come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in the church I'm going to now, I don't exactly know how the leadership would react to change. I just see a lot of those subtle changes, especially in the community aspect, that I see very important, as well as a desire to truth in the Bible and taking the Bible seriously and literally. I see that also there. So, but I think, yeah, that willingness to change and reconsider and things like that, not in a way that compromises on truth and what the Lord wants, but in a way that challenges a lot of like traditions and things like that. Is this the best way to do this? Is there a better way? Is there a more biblical way? Is this biblical even to begin with? I think that's what I would change.
Yeah, all those things you said, I think that it reminds me of my third point in my OG previous video regarding the pride is one thing, but the hostility towards change, probably one of the biggest issues that I see. Might make a longer video on that one day, but for now, you have heard it firsthand from a guy who used to be Brethren. This is his experience. Okay.
I guess I would also say the reason I feel like there needs to be that attitude towards change is I do think there's a lot of things in the Brethren Assembly that are being done poorly and in a way that hurts the members and
Shots fired.
and strays away from what the Bible's intentions are. If it was all fine and dandy and like right on track, you should still have an attitude like that to change, but it wouldn't be as big of an issue. Right. But it's the fact that over time, I'm realizing that I think a lot of the things, it really comes down to the fact that there's a lot of things that I think the Brethren Assembly does that is not necessarily biblical or is even hurting its members or is just not efficient. And of course, I wouldn't have any issue with that of course, I wouldn't have any issue with the inability to change. I mean, it still should be definitely something that's emphasized there.
Mm-hmm.
But if everything was fine and dandy, then it wouldn't be as big of a deal, right? Although we should always be receptive to change, no matter what.
Yeah.
To seriously consider it and take it into consideration. But it's the fact that I think a lot of things that the Brethren Assembly is doing is not necessarily biblical or is even hurting its members. And I'll just throw a couple examples to salt everything, I guess. But maybe just like the way the meeting is run,
Okay.
with the breaking of bread first and then the coffee break and then the second meeting and stuff like that. Like, is this the best way we can run the meeting? That would be a discussion that I think would be very hard to have, but not one that I think should be hard to have in a way, right? And that's a small thing, but it is a big thing. If the meeting's too long or if it's not benefiting the members, if they're not getting anything out of the second hymn sing or whatever it is, right? Then we should think about it. We should consider it and be willing to change whatever we need to change to change that. Additionally, I think, to put it broadly, I think the way we're handling women's roles in the church is not accurate. I shouldn't say we're, because I'm not actually in Brethren Assembly anymore. But I just, I won't say any specifics, but I think generally that it's not accurate biblically the way it's being handled, and that can only hurt people, right? If we're being overly legalistic or not legalistic enough, then that's just going to directly affect people's lives and ministries, right? Which can't be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a couple things, and a couple things that would be extraordinarily difficult conversations to have. And I don't think they can be difficult conversations, but I think there needs to be a willingness to work through it. Because if what we're doing is the best way, then we should be able to defend that and arrive there through thoughtful discussion and stuff like that.
Okay, you heard it from him. I didn't say that. You go after this guy. I didn't say any of that. Okay,
Except in the last video.
that was just a suggestion. Okay, one more question in this category. So, do you think? Obviously, you have already left, so that shows that you didn't think it was a worthy battle to fight at this current time. But do you think it is salvageable, I guess? Or would you, if somebody were to say, hey, I am willing to fight this battle and I'm willing to go change things, do you think this will be fruitful, or do you think it's a waste of time?
I think it's totally salvageable, I guess, as you could say. At the time, I just didn't have the strength to do it. I didn't have the clarity, and a lot of other things and other ministry I was doing was suffering greatly because of that lack of support.
Yeah.
So at that time, there was no chance I was going to be able to meaningfully have an influence or an effect or anything like that in the church. But I think someone else who's maybe has some other forms of support behind them or things like that can absolutely make a good change. And I have already seen many good changes. There are things happening in our local church anyway that are very exciting to see, and I'm stoked from afar to like see it all happening. And if I was in a different position, I would probably jump in there and do it all. It's more of a season of life thing that I need to find a community and a support to stand on. And that's more of a personal thing and a personal season of life thing. But someone in a different season of life, in a different position or something like that, I absolutely think there's tons of hope and tons of good in the Brethren Assembly.
Totally. Yeah.
There just needs to be a lot of humility and willingness to think about it and maybe change.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree with you. The support does really change a lot of things. We were running a youth group together for 4 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And alongside that, we did a young adults at our church, and they put two guys who has never done this before into the leadership chair and just left them there, basically. Now, this is not meant to be provocative or malicious, but here's just a practical example to show you that we were doing those things, but we were really noticing that lack of support. And it became really, really difficult to continue doing it week by week. And we're dealing with so many things in our personal lives. And we're trying to, figure out how to manage some of these things, because lo and behold, running a social club for young people is kind of hard. And we have to come up with games and all of that and finances. Anyways, I'm going on and on. At this point, we have both agreed that, look, the support is just not there. Whereas other churches with their youth group, they would get that support, and with all their other ministries as well. They have tremendous support from the leadership team, their denomination, getting lots of resources. And we have reached out about this, right? We had several meetings with the elders, and it's not to say that they don't want to be helpful. I just don't think the manpower is there, and the infrastructure is just not there. So that tells you another thing why maybe there's a sort of a decline going on in the Brethren Assemblies. Just like I mentioned earlier, lack of support, manpower, and resources.
All right. I'm here to try and distract you from the fact that over Danny's mic will be him spraying things into his nose.
Ow, my nose.
You are looking good. You're loved. Your life has meaning. And you should go ask that girl out. Okay, I also wanted to add that we didn't receive no support, and you didn't say that, but we did definitely receive support. We got sort of phased in as youth group leaders by a very awesome brother who led the youth group before us, and that was tremendously helpful, like super helpful. And additionally, we had a building to meet in, and we were getting funding for youth group for the expenses we had. So that was really good.
Yes.
And that was a huge burden off the back. If we had to figure those things out too, that would have been crazy to find a place to meet every week. And I think I didn't honestly notice the lack of support until I started to think about it. Because as I was thinking about joining this new church, the thought of plugging into a youth group or even a young adults to help at that was already had people that had experience and that had done this kind of thing before and knew how to run a team and stuff like that, it honestly made me like emotional to think about.
Oh man.
And I like thought about that, and then I looked back at like what we were doing, which has been just so blessed by God, and I'm very thankful. But I was like, wow, I haven't even noticed, but this has been extraordinarily stressful and challenging all this time, which is obvious. It obviously makes sense, but you just don't notice it when you're going through it, which I think is a blessing. But yeah, like, wow, what a meaningful difference it would make to have sort of regular meetings with leadership, or to be mentored by people who are experienced in this kind of thing to help you lead. And again, what you say, I don't think it's about out of like a lack of desire to do it or anything like that. It's just manpower, right? We don't have any full-time people at our church at all. And I mean, I see that in our own youth group when we're all working. It just makes a difference. There's just an amount of time and effort that you can't pull out of thin air. So I think that makes a big impact. All right. I'm here to try and distract you from the fact that over Danny's mic will be him spraying things into his nose.
Ow, my nose.
You are looking good. You're loved. Your life has meaning. And you should go ask that girl out.
I agree. I want to get some the response from you from maybe some common objections that we might get, or not might, already see and have gotten from people regarding this whole conversation. So I just want to see your perspective on that. The biggest one I have seen, and really this sentiment is everywhere, and I hear in so many meetings and in sermons, is this idea of those who choose to walk away from the assemblies, whatever reason they give, they are kind of written off as, well, the assemblies are doing nothing wrong. It's just that they're having a problem in their walk with the Lord, and it's their personal issue, something to be repented of. And once they do, they'll come back and be really happy. So kind of the fault and the weight goes all onto the person who is leaving. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that before. That's not making that one up. Honestly, it just makes me really sad, because it's having been to other churches and camps and things like that, and even churches that I don't strongly agree with all their theology and everything that they do, right? There is so much good and so much we can gain and benefit from what other churches are doing. And to think that we're the ones that are doing the best at everything, and I know no one would say that, right? But even in a majority sense, the ones that are doing the best, that are walking the most straight and narrow, shows a real misunderstanding of what other churches are and what they truly believe. There's a sort of stereotype that's put onto any churches that aren't the Assemblies, right? And it's not true. There is so much good being done. People's lives are being changed. People are being saved. People are reading the Bible. People are learning theology. People are doing all these things in other churches around the world. And in many aspects, sometimes all aspects, they're doing it better than we're doing it. And not that you, like, that's okay. You know, you don't have to feel extra bad because your church isn't doing as well as another church. That's not the point. Every church is unique and different. But it's the fact that that's not understood. That, like, if you're not going to an assembly, you're just obviously worse off in your walk with God, is a really misunderstanding argument from my perspective. And I do hear it, and it makes me so sad to put that issue on the person, that there's no way that the church could be where a root of an issue is. It all has to be put on the person. It's super unfair and misunderstanding to a person. And it could be the case. It has been the case where it's a personal issue that the person needs to work out, and that's the reason they left, and they maybe shouldn't have. Totally fair. But to blanket sort of sweep everybody like that is a very bold thing to say, and a very strong thing to say. And if you're wrong, it's extraordinarily hurtful and damaging if you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just, anyone who gives that objection, I would ask them to think about it and think about the implications if they're wrong about what they're saying, and to slow down and consider if there's any other reasoning that maybe that's on us, that we can fix before just blaming the other person.
Yeah, that's the response I would give as well. He said it really well, probably better than I could say it. Whatever. I'm the host. I'm the boss. I'm the best.
Deal with it.
Okay. Second objection, and really the last one that's, I think, relevant to this discussion, is they say that the Assemblies have an established culture, and then the way of doing things, this culture, it serves a purpose. And the Lord has it this way for a purpose, for a group of people, because you have to admit the people who decide to stay there, a lot of them are happy and comfortable there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they feel like they're growing, they're being fed. So they would say, don't push your vision onto the Assemblies. Maybe the Lord has you have this vision, you should go elsewhere. And then the Assembly should just stay this way and have no change, because that's just their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then you should take it somewhere else. And
Okay.
no, actually, so they kind of put off the need for change in this way. So if someone said that to you, what would you say?
Very interesting take, I'd say. And honestly, in some ways, I think it's fair. It has continually surprised me by this is not true in all assemblies, but at least in ours, by the numbers. There's a lot of people there. And there's actually a decent amount of people that pop in and stick around. And it's surprising to me, at the very least, from my experience in the assembly, that would be the case. I guess I would go back to, honestly, what's one of the Assembly's strongest points. That's one of the things they like to push, is that it's not about numbers. Whatever the numbers are, it doesn't matter, right? So that goes in good ways and bad ways, right? You can fill a church in bad ways. But I guess in that sense, if you're not hurting anybody, then it's okay. But I think we should always be striving to do better in everything that we do.
Yeah.
I think God gives us all a measure of something in life, right? And he expects us to be clever with it. He expects us to do well with what we have, right? Invest it, in a sense, right? And to take that one thing and multiply it into more things, right? So I think that no matter who you are and what ministry you run, taking an objective look at your ministry and seeing how can we do it better is always a good thing. And I think that's what the brethren needs in a lot of ways. And additionally, in more of the theological sense, I think if you have an attitude that is not open to change, it makes a space where just bad theology and bad teaching and unhelpful practices can thrive and abound. Because if you can't change anything, then these things can't be recognized, and they can't be sorted out, and they'll kind of just run amok. And I know not everybody sees that, but I do see some of that in the Brethren Assembly. And I think it can be really harmful to people in their understanding of ministry and who God is. Again, I'm thinking about women's roles a little bit in this one, right? But if it's wrong, then it's very serious. If it's not wrong, then it's only a matter of time before something like that does sneak in and go sideways and start to make things weird, right? So yeah, I guess that would be my response to that.
Okay, great response. Good for me, because I haven't thought of a response for that yet. I'm going to use that in the next video.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more to be said about that, for sure. But at least off the dome, that's what I got.
Off the cuff response, right.
Right, we should always want to do better.
Amen. I think all of us could say amen to that. Okay, so we're at the end portion of our video. Really just for some concluding thoughts from your host, and I'll get Sean a chance to speak in a second. Like we said earlier, we are just offering our perspectives, very limited, very fallible, right? We haven't been to a lot, of Brethren Assemblies, and we've only lived, what, like 20 something years of this life. And there's lots of things that we miss, a lot of things that fall through the cracks. And I'm sure there will be things that we look back on this video and say, maybe we could have said that better, or I changed my mind about this. So we're always open to discussion. And part of the reason why I'm making this series is so that we can have a discussion, so that you can hear voices from people like Sean, from people like me, real people that used to and are living in your assemblies today, who might be struggling, real people who want change. And we just want to have a dialogue. And all we're asking for is some humility to listen, and we'll offer you the same. If you have some pushback or some corrections, or you just want to hear more, you like to agree with us, the channel is open, so long as you're respectful and we don't sense that you're trying to wisdom shotgun us. If I see that you're trying to wisdom shotgun me, I'm out of here. Yeah, any final thoughts you want to leave with our audience before we end the podcast?
Sure. Yeah, just on your point, this is only my experience. There's so much more that could be said, and this is in no way comprehensive. If this was intended to be comprehensive and total and final, I don't think either of us would have done this. That would be it. And I really appreciate Danny's perspective. This is just to start discussion. So start the conversation is to hear from other people who may have had similar experiences or different experiences than we had in the church. And if there's anything in here that wasn't your experience or you disagree with, it's totally fair. It's totally all good. We just ask that you would see us as maybe somebody who is in your church, who is struggling with these things or considering leaving or having issues with the way things were going, and that you would just see us as that person and consider it and work through it and consider what's the best thing that needs to be done here.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Look forward to my future videos, one of which will be I'm going to respond to your comments and some common objections to some of the things I said in the previous video. And then I'm going to take a long time to think about it, to research. And then I'll have a final video where I talk about what I think should be done and what I think can be done, or whether we should be doing anything at all, my concluding thoughts on this matter. And then you'll see whether I stick around or not. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. God bless.
Bye.